I hired him to clean my pool. A simple transaction. A wealthy black woman, a struggling white man on his knees, scrubbing tiles under the Miami sun. But when our eyes met for the first time, I felt my wrists burn. Phantom chains I had never worn, and in his eyes I saw terror, the kind of terror that spans centuries. What I discovered in my past life regression didn't just explain the inexplicable hatred I felt for this stranger. It revealed that some debts take lifetimes to repay. My name is Amara, and this is the story of the man who once owned my soul. I had everything. At 42 years old, I was the founder and CEO of Nurture Foods, one of the fastest-growing organic food companies in the United States. My face had graced the covers of Forbes, Black Enterprise, and Entrepreneur magazine. My waterfront mansion in Coral Gables, Florida, was featured in Architectural Digest. My 3 children attended the finest private schools. My husband, Derek, a retired NFL player turned sports commentator, was my rock, my partner, my best friend of 20 years. By every measure society uses to calculate success, I had won. But I carried something invisible. Something I had never spoken about to anyone. Not my husband, not my therapist, not my closest friends. Since childhood, I had experienced what I called the burning. Without warning, my wrists would ache with a searing pain that had no medical explanation. I'd had MRIs, nerve conduction studies, seen rheumatologists and neurologists. Every test came back normal. Every doctor was baffled. The burning came randomly. Sometimes months would pass without an episode. Other times it happened daily. But there was one consistent trigger that I had noticed over the years. One I had never admitted to anyone because it filled me with shame. The burning intensified around certain white men. Not all of them, not most of them, but specific ones. Men I had never met, never spoken to, never interacted with. Something about them, their posture, their voice, their energy, would trigger the phantom flames around my wrists, and I would have to excuse myself, gripping my arms, breathing through the inexplicable agony. I had convinced myself it was stress, trauma response, perhaps some repressed memory from childhood that my conscious mind had buried. I had done years of therapy, explored every psychological avenue, and still the burning remained. On the morning of March 15th, 2019, I was working from home, reviewing quarterly reports in my home office that overlooked the pool. My housekeeper, Maria, knocked softly. "Mrs. Johnson, the pool service is here. New company you wanted to try." I nodded without looking up. I had fired the previous pool company after they damaged some of my imported Italian tiles. This new company, Crystal Waters Pool Services, had come highly recommended by a neighbor. "Send them to the back. I'll check on them later." An hour passed. I finished my reports and decided to take a break. I walked through my sprawling kitchen, grabbed a sparkling water from the refrigerator, and stepped out onto the patio. The Miami sun was brilliant, glinting off the turquoise pool water like scattered diamonds. And there, on his hands and knees at the far end of the pool, was a man scrubbing the tiles. He was white, probably mid-50s, with weathered skin that spoke of decades working outdoors. His clothes were worn but clean. His movements were methodical, practiced, the movements of a man who had done this work for many years. I took a sip of my water and began walking toward him, intending to introduce myself and inspect the tiles that had been damaged. I made it 3 steps. The burning exploded across my wrists with an intensity I had never experienced before. I gasped, dropping the glass bottle which shattered on the travertine patio, but I barely heard it. The pain was blinding, consuming, as if someone had wrapped white-hot iron around my arms. And then the man looked up. Our eyes met. Everything stopped. I couldn't breathe. The burning in my wrists seemed to pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat. But it was his eyes that froze me in place. Blue eyes. Pale, watery blue. Eyes that held something I couldn't name. Recognition, fear, and something that looked almost like guilt. The man dropped his scrub brush. His face went pale beneath his sunburn. He scrambled backward, nearly falling into the pool, his mouth opening and closing without sound. I, he stammered. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I stood paralyzed, my wrists screaming, my mind racing. Why was he apologizing? We had never met. I was certain we had never met. But somewhere, in a place beyond logic, beyond conscious memory, I knew him. I knew him, and I hated him with a ferocity that terrified me. Get out, I heard myself say. My voice was cold, commanding, a voice I didn't recognize. Get off my property. The man nodded frantically, gathering his supplies with shaking hands. He couldn't look at me. His whole body trembled as he stuffed brushes and bottles into his bucket. I'm sorry, he said again, his voice cracking. I never thought. I didn't know you'd be. Get out! He fled. Literally fled, running around the side of the house, leaving half his equipment behind. I heard his truck start, heard the tires squeal as he tore out of my driveway. And then I collapsed. Maria found me on the patio, curled in a fetal position, clutching my wrists, sobbing uncontrollably. She called 911, terrified that I was having a stroke or a heart attack. But when the paramedics arrived, my vitals were normal. The burning had faded to a dull ache, and I had no explanation for what had happened. None that made any sense. The weeks that followed were the most unsettling of my life. I couldn't stop thinking about the pool man. His face haunted my dreams. Dreams that were becoming increasingly vivid and disturbing. I would wake at 3 a.m, drenched in sweat, the phantom chains burning around my wrists, with fragments of images dissolving before I could grasp them. Sugarcane. Endless fields of sugarcane. A white house on a hill with columns and a wide veranda. The sound of a whip. The smell of blood. Derek was worried. He had never seen me like this. Distracted, irritable, prone to sudden tears. I couldn't explain it to him because I couldn't explain it to myself. Baby, talk to me, he pleaded one night, finding me standing at the window at 2 a.m., staring out at the dark pool. Whatever this is, we can work through it together. But how could I tell him that a stranger's face had unlocked something inside me? How could I explain the irrational, consuming hatred I felt for a man I'd never met? How could I describe the growing certainty that my entire life, my success, my family, my identity, was somehow connected to this weathered pool cleaner with the guilty eyes? I couldn't, so I lied. Work stress, I said, forcing a smile. The new product launch. You know how it is. Derek didn't believe me. I could see it in his eyes. But he loved me enough to give me space, and for that, I was grateful. 3 weeks after the encounter, I did something I had always dismissed as pseudoscience, something I would have laughed at if anyone had suggested it. I booked a session with a past life regression therapist. Dr. Helena Vasquez came highly recommended by a colleague, a fellow CEO who had undergone regression therapy after struggling with a lifelong fear of drowning. She had discovered a past life where she had died at sea, and processing that experience had eliminated her phobia entirely. I had smiled politely when I'd heard this story, internally rolling my eyes. Past lives. Reincarnation. It all sounded like New Age nonsense. But I was desperate. The burning in my wrist was getting worse. The dreams were intensifying, and I couldn't shake the image of the pool man's face, or the overwhelming sense that I had unfinished business with him, business that spanned more than this single lifetime. Dr. Vasquez's office was not what I expected. No crystals, no incense, no mystical decorations. It was a clean, modern space in a professional medical building, with diplomas on the wall and comfortable leather furniture. Dr. Vasquez herself was a petite Cuban woman in her 60s, with silver hair and warm brown eyes. She shook my hand firmly. I understand you're skeptical, she said, settling into her chair. Most successful people are. They've built their lives on logic, evidence, measurable results. What I do doesn't fit neatly into those categories. Then why should I believe in it? I asked. You shouldn't believe in anything. Belief is not required. I'm simply going to guide you into a relaxed state and ask you to describe what you experience. The meaning, if there is any, is for you to determine." She explained the process. It was similar to hypnotherapy, she said. I would remain conscious and in control throughout the session. I could stop at any time. There was nothing mystical or supernatural about the technique itself. It was simply a way of accessing deeper layers of consciousness, memories that the waking mind typically kept suppressed. Some people experience vivid imagery that feels like memory, Dr. Vasquez said. Others experience emotions, physical sensations, or fragments of narrative. There's no right or wrong way to experience regression. I simply ask that you describe whatever comes, without judgment or editing. I agreed. What did I have to lose? I lay on a comfortable couch. Dr. Vasquez dimmed the lights and guided me through a progressive relaxation exercise, tensing and releasing muscle groups, deepening my breathing, counting backward from 100. I felt myself sinking. Not into sleep, exactly, but into a state of profound relaxation, as if the boundaries of my body were becoming less defined. Dr. Vasquez's voice was gentle, rhythmic. I want you to imagine a corridor. A long corridor with many doors. Each door leads to a different time, a different place, a different life. When you're ready, I want you to walk down this corridor and find the door that wants to open for you, the door that holds what you need to see. I saw the corridor. It stretched endlessly in both directions, lined with doors of every shape and size. Some were ornate, gilded. Others were simple wood. One door, far down the corridor to my left, was different from all the others. It was not really a door at all. It was a pair of iron gates, rusted and ancient, flanked by sugar-cane stalks that grew impossibly tall, reaching toward a sky that was hazy with smoke. And the gates were already opening. I see gates, I whispered, iron gates. And sugar-cane, so much sugar-cane. Step through the gates, Dr. Vasquez said. Tell me what you see. The heat was the first thing I felt. Oppressive, suffocating heat that pressed against my skin like a living thing. The air was thick with moisture and the sweet, cloying smell of sugarcane juice, a smell that would haunt me for the rest of this life and whatever lives came after. I stood at the edge of an endless field, but I wasn't me anymore. Not Amara, not here, not now. The sugarcane stretched to the horizon in every direction, a sea of green and gold beneath a merciless Brazilian sun. I looked down at my hands. They were smaller than my hands, calloused and scarred, the nails broken and caked with dirt. They were the hands of someone who had worked the earth since childhood, and around my wrists were iron shackles, connected by a heavy chain. I'm in chains, I heard myself say, my voice strange and distant in my own ears. I'm a slave. Can you tell me your name? Dr. Vasquez's voice came from far away, like a voice from another world. The name rose from somewhere deep, unbidden. Azelie. My name is Azelie. And with the name came the memories. Not as abstract images, but as lived experience, as real and immediate as my life in Miami, as the weight of the chains around my wrists. I was 17 years old. I had been born on this plantation, the Fazenda de Esperança, the farm of hope, though there was no hope here, only sugar and suffering and death. My mother, Makena, had been captured from the Yoruba lands as a child and brought across the ocean in the belly of a ship, one of the lucky ones who survived the crossing. Makena had taught me everything, the old songs, the old prayers, the language of my ancestors. She taught me which plants could heal and which could kill. She taught me to keep the fire of my spirit burning even as my body was broken by labor. Makena had died 2 years ago, worked to death in the fields, her body giving out during the harvest season. I had held my mother's hand as she took her final breath, had sung the old songs to guide her spirit home. Now I was alone, but I was not empty. The fire my mother had kindled still burned. Tell me about your life, Azelie, Dr. Vasquez's voice guided. Tell me about the plantation. The memories flowed like water breaking through a dam. Fazenda da Esperança was one of the largest sugar plantations in the state of Bahia, owned by the Ferreira family for 3 generations. In 1847, the year that had crystallized in my mind, the plantation was run by Henrique Ferreira, the eldest son who had inherited upon his father's death. Henrique was 32 years old, tall, with pale blue eyes and hair that had once been blonde, but was now going gray from stress and drink. He had been handsome once. The slave women whispered about it, about the days when young Henrique had been kind, when he had even secretly taught a few of the enslaved children to read. But that Henrique was gone. The man who ruled Fazenda da Esperança now was a monster. The transformation had begun when Henrique's young wife Isabella died in childbirth, along with the baby. Something broke inside him that day. The kindness drained out of his eyes, replaced by something cold and cruel. He began drinking heavily. He beat the enslaved people for minor infractions, or for no reason at all. He separated families as punishment, selling children away from their mothers to other plantations. And his eyes had begun to linger on me. I was beautiful. Even in my ragged clothes, even with the calluses and the scars, I was beautiful. I had my mother's high cheekbones and my father's tall, willful bearing. My father, who had been sold away before I was born, had reportedly been a prince in his homeland, a man of noble blood. Noble blood still meant nothing here. Here, I was property. He watches me, I heard myself saying. The master. He watches me when I work, when I carry water, when I walk to the senzala at night. He watches me like a predator watches its prey. Dr. Vasquez was silent, letting the memories flow. And they did. It happened on a night when the full moon hung low over the sugarcane fields, casting silver light across the world. I had finished my work in the main house. I was one of the domestic slaves, assigned to cleaning and serving rather than field work, a position that was considered privileged, but that brought its own dangers. Proximity to the master meant proximity to his cruelty and to his desire. I was walking back to the senzala, the slave quarters, when I heard footsteps behind me. Azelie, his voice was thick with cachaca, the sugarcane liquor that he consumed in ever-increasing quantities. I froze, my heart hammering against my ribs. Turn around. Look at me. I obeyed. I had no choice. Disobedience meant the whip. Or worse. I had seen what happened to those who defied Henrique Ferreira. He stood on the path, swaying slightly, his pale blue eyes catching the moonlight. In his hand was a half-empty bottle. He took a long drink, never breaking eye contact. "Do you know what day it is?" he asked. I shook my head. "It's the anniversary of Isabella's death." "My beautiful Isabella," his voice cracked. 3 years. 3 years since God took her from me. "I'm sorry, senor," I whispered. "Are you?" He laughed bitterly. "Are you sorry? What do you know of love? What do you know of loss?" I thought of my mother, dying in my arms. I said nothing. Henrique moved closer. I could smell the liquor on his breath, the sour sweat of his unwashed body. He reached out and touched my face, his fingers tracing my cheekbone. "You're beautiful," he murmured. "So beautiful." Just like she was. I stood perfectly still, barely breathing. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but there was nowhere to go. The plantation was surrounded by miles of wilderness. Escaped slaves were hunted with dogs and brought back to be made examples of, their punishment witnessed by all to discourage others. "Come with me," Henrique said. It was not a request. He took me to the big house, to his bedroom. And there, beneath the portrait of his dead wife, he did what countless masters had done to countless enslaved women throughout the centuries. When it was over, when he had collapsed into drunken unconsciousness, I lay in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, feeling something inside me turn to ice. I had always believed what my mother told me, that my spirit was unbreakable, that no man could take what I would not give, that my soul remained free even if my body was in chains. I did not believe that anymore, But as I lay there, something else grew in the frozen wasteland of my heart. A plan. The abuse continued for months. Henrique would send for me whenever the mood struck him, whenever the liquor unlocked his demons, whenever the anniversary of some painful memory drove him to seek oblivion in domination. I learned to leave my body during these encounters, to float above myself and wait for it to end. But I was not passive. During the days, I began to observe, to listen, to plan. I learned which slaves could be trusted and which were loyal to the master in exchange for small privileges. I learned the rhythms of the plantation, when the overseers were drunk and inattentive, when the patrols were sparse. I learned where Henrique kept his money, his important documents, the keys to the shackles and the senzala. And I learned about the Quilombo. Whispered stories passed between the enslaved people spoke of a community of escaped slaves deep in the mountains, a place where black men and women lived free, beyond the reach of the plantation owners and their whips. The Quilombo was led by a man named Zumbi, named after the legendary warrior of Palmares. It was said that he had once been a slave himself, that he had killed his master with his bare hands and led a dozen others to freedom. The Quilombo was real. I became certain of this, and I began to make contact with those who knew the way. But escape was not enough. Something darker had taken root in my heart. The fire my mother had kindled had transformed into something else, a burning desire for vengeance. I did not simply want to be free. I wanted Henrique Ferreira to suffer as I had suffered. I wanted him to lose everything, just as I had lost everything. I wanted him to burn. The plan came together over the course of 6 months. I had become Henrique's favorite, if such a word could be used for something so monstrous. He trusted me in a way he trusted no other slave. He spoke to me sometimes, in his drunken moments, of his fears and regrets. He told me about his debts, about the creditors circling like vultures, about the bad harvests and the falling price of sugar that were driving him toward ruin. He had no idea that I understood Portuguese perfectly, that I remembered every word, that I was assembling a picture of his vulnerabilities, like pieces of a puzzle. The dry season of 1849 was the worst in memory. The sugar cane crackled like kindling. The wells ran low. Fires were a constant danger, and Henrique had forbidden any open flame in the senzala, an irony that was not lost on me. On the night I had chosen, there was no moon. I had spent weeks preparing. I had hidden food and water along the path to the mountains. I had memorized the route to the Quilombo. I had recruited 7 others who were willing to risk everything for freedom. But before we fled, there was one thing I had to do. I crept into the main house using the key I had stolen from Henrique's desk. I moved through the darkness with the silent grace of someone who had cleaned these floors 1,000 times, who knew every creaking board, every squeaky hinge. I found him in his bedroom, unconscious from drink as usual, sprawled across the bed, where he had violated me so many times. I stood over him, a candle in one hand and a bottle of cachaca in the other. I could kill him now, slit his throat with the kitchen knife hidden in my clothes. It would be easy. It would be just. But death was too merciful. I wanted him to live. I wanted him to suffer. I poured the cachaca across the floor, across the curtains, across the papers on his desk, the deeds and contracts and financial documents that represented his power, his identity, his place in the world. And then I touched the candle to the alcohol. The flames erupted with a soft whoosh, racing across the floor, climbing the curtains, reaching hungry fingers toward the ceiling. I didn't run. I stood and watched for a long moment, the fire reflecting in my eyes. Henrique stirred, coughing. His eyes opened, unfocused and confused, and then went wide with terror as he saw the flames. "Azelie?" he croaked. What have you done?" I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had smiled in years. "I have taken back what you stole," I said. "Your house, your wealth, your power. I leave you with nothing but ashes." I turned and walked out of the burning room, closing the door behind me. I didn't look back. The fire spread faster than I had anticipated. The dry season had turned the big house into a tinderbox, and within minutes, the entire structure was engulfed in flames that lit up the night sky like a new sun. Slaves poured out of the senzala, shouting, some running toward the fire, others fleeing into the fields. In the chaos, my 7 companions and I slipped away into the darkness. We ran for hours, following paths that had been memorized, guided by stars and landmarks and the desperate hope of freedom. Behind us, the orange glow of the burning plantation faded slowly into the distance. But Henrique had survived. I didn't know this then. I assumed he had perished in the fire, consumed by the flames of his own making, a fitting end for a man who had consumed so many lives. I was wrong. I would only learn later that Henrique had escaped through a window, suffering severe burns but surviving. And as he watched his life's work burn to the ground, something crystallized in his mind. A certainty that I was responsible, a hatred that matched my own in intensity. He would find me. No matter how long it took, he would find me and make me pay. But that pursuit was still ahead. In the moment, my companions and I ran through the wilderness, through jungle and mountain, through streams that hid our scent from the tracking dogs. On the 3rd day, exhausted and starving, we found the Quilombo. It was everything the whispered stories had promised. A community of free black people, hundreds strong, living in the mountains beyond the reach of the slave catchers. They had farms and houses and a council of elders. They had warriors trained to defend their freedom, and they welcomed us with open arms. For the first time in my life, I was free. The days that followed were a revelation. I learned what it felt like to wake without fear, to work for my own benefit, to speak my mind without fear of the whip. I learned to fight alongside the Quilombo's warriors, my small body hiding a fierce determination that earned the respect of even the most skeptical fighters. I found love. His name was Kofi, a man who had been born free in the Quilombo, whose parents had escaped a different plantation decades earlier. He was gentle and strong, with a laugh that made my heart soar and hands that touched me as if I were precious. With Kofi, I began to heal. We were married in the tradition of the Yoruba, the ceremony led by an elder who had been a priest in his homeland before the slavers came. We built a small house at the edge of the Quilombo, with a garden where I grew the healing plants my mother had taught me about. For 2 years, I was happy. I began to believe that I had escaped my past, that Henrique Ferreira was dead or had forgotten me, that the flames had cleansed everything and given me a new beginning. I should have known better. Henrique Ferreira had not forgotten. The fire had destroyed his home, his fortune, his standing in society. His creditors had seized what remained of his assets. His family had disowned him. He had become a beggar, a drunk wandering the streets of Salvador, consumed by hatred and the burning desire for revenge. But he had also become cunning. He spent months gathering information, bribing other plantation owners, torturing captured runaway slaves, until they revealed what they knew about the Quilombos in the mountains. Piece by piece, he assembled a map to the community where I had found refuge. And then he made a deal with the devil. The provincial guard had been trying to destroy the Quilombos for years, seeing them as a threat to the institution of slavery, a dangerous example that freedom was possible. Henrique offered them what they had been unable to obtain on their own, the exact location of the largest Quilombo in the region. In exchange, he wanted only one thing: me. On a night when the rains had finally come, breaking the long dry season, the attack began. 200 soldiers surrounded the Quilombo in the darkness, their approach masked by the sound of the downpour. The sentries never saw them coming. I was awakened by screaming. I ran outside to find the Quilombo in chaos, houses burning despite the rain, which meant they had been set ablaze with oil. People running in every direction. The crack of gunfire. The clash of machetes. Kofi! I screamed, searching the chaos for my husband. I found him at the edge of the village fighting 3 soldiers at once. He was magnificent, his machete flashing in the firelight, his face a mask of fury. But there were too many. As I watched, one of the soldiers shot him in the back. Kofi fell. I screamed and ran toward him, but hands grabbed me from behind. I fought like a wild animal, biting and clawing, but they were too strong. They dragged me away from Kofi's body, away from the burning Quilombo, into the darkness of the jungle. And then I saw him. Henrique Ferreira emerged from the shadows, his face scarred from the fire I had set, his pale blue eyes blazing with triumph. "Did you think you could escape me?" he whispered. "Did you think you could take everything from me and walk away?" I spat in his face. He laughed. "I'm not going to kill you," he said. "Death is too easy. Too quick. I'm going to make sure you live a very, very long time. And every day of that life will be suffering." Henrique kept his promise. He sold me to the worst plantation in Brazil, a place called Inferno Verde, Green Hell, known for working its slaves to death within months. The owner, a man named Tavares, was legendary for his cruelty, but Henrique had made special arrangements. I was not to be killed. I was not to be maimed. I was to be kept alive and working no matter what, for as long as possible. Tavares was paid handsomely to ensure this. For 3 years I endured. I worked the fields from before dawn until after dark. I was fed barely enough to survive. I watched friends die around me, their bodies discarded like broken tools. I was beaten regularly, my back becoming a map of scars, but never beaten badly enough to threaten my life. And once a month, Henrique would visit. He never touched me. He simply stood at the edge of the field and watched me work, a satisfied smile on his scarred face. Sometimes he would speak to me, describing the destruction of the Quilombo, the deaths of everyone I had loved, the way Kofi had screamed as he died. "This is your life now," he would say. "This is what you earned when you took everything from me." I did not respond. I had gone somewhere deep inside myself, to a place where Henrique's words couldn't reach. I endured, because some part of me refused to give him the satisfaction of breaking completely. But the body has its limits. In the summer of 1852, I collapsed in the sugarcane field and did not get up. The overseer whipped me, but I didn't respond. He called for water, forced it between my lips, but I couldn't swallow. My body had simply given out, pushed beyond what any human being could endure. They carried me to the senzala and laid me on a thin mat on the dirt floor. The other enslaved people gathered around, singing the old songs, the songs of passage that guided spirits back to their ancestors. Henrique was summoned. He arrived at sunset, standing in the doorway of the senzala, looking down at me. "You're dying," he said. There was no satisfaction in his voice now. Strangely, there was something almost like disappointment. I opened my eyes. It took all my remaining strength. "Yes," I whispered. "I am free now. Finally free." "But you—" I paused, gathering breath. "You will carry this weight forever. In this life. In the next. In every life until you understand what you have done." "Is that a curse?" Henrique laughed, but the sound was hollow. "No." My lips curved into the ghost of a smile. "It is a promise. We will meet again, you and I. And when we do, you will feel everything you have made me feel. Every chain, every whip, every moment of despair. The universe does not forget. And neither will I." I closed my eyes. I took one final breath. And then, darkness. I gasped, jerking upright on Dr. Vasquez's couch. I was sobbing. My wrists were on fire. My body was shaking uncontrollably. I died. I choked out. I felt myself die. I felt everything. Dr. Vasquez handed me tissues, her face calm but compassionate. "Take your time. Breathe. You're safe. You're here, in Miami, in 2019. Azelie's life is over, but you carry her memories. I couldn't stop crying. The weight of those memories, the suffering, the loss, the hatred, the love, the fire, the death, pressed down on me like a physical burden. And one thing stood out above all else. The pale blue eyes. Henrique's eyes. The pool man's eyes. "It's him," I whispered, "the man who came to clean my pool. It's Henrique." The same soul. I recognized him, and he recognized me. Dr. Vasquez nodded slowly. It's not uncommon for souls to reincarnate in proximity to each other, especially when there's unfinished business between them. Karma, some call it. The universe creating opportunities for resolution. Resolution? I laughed bitterly. What resolution? He destroyed me. He destroyed everything I loved. He kept me alive just to watch me suffer. How do I resolve that? That's for you to discover. But I would suggest that the burning in your wrists, the phantom chains, is a message. Your soul is asking you to address this, to find closure. By doing what? Forgiving him? I can't. I won't. Dr. Vasquez was silent for a long moment. Forgiveness is not about absolving someone of their sins. It's about freeing yourself from the chains that bind you to them. As long as you carry hatred for Henrique, or whatever name his soul wears now, you remain connected to him. You remain his prisoner, just as Azelie was. I shook my head. But even as I rejected the idea, something in me knew that Dr. Vasquez was right. The hatred I felt for the pool man was irrational, overwhelming, consuming, and it was destroying my peace of mind as surely as Henrique's cruelty had destroyed Azelie's body. I left Dr. Vasquez's office in a daze. For weeks I struggled. The memories of Azelie's life would not leave me. I dreamed of the sugarcane, the fire, Kofi's death, the long years of suffering at Inferno Verde. I woke every morning with my wrists burning, a reminder that the chains had never truly been removed, and I couldn't stop thinking about the pool man. His name, I discovered through a simple internet search, was David Carter, 54 years old, owner of a struggling pool cleaning business, 2 divorces, estranged from his adult children, living in a small apartment in a working-class neighborhood, a far cry from the wealthy plantation owner he had once been. But the eyes were the same. I didn't plan to confront him. But one morning, I found myself driving to his address, parking across the street from his modest apartment building. I sat in my BMW, watching him leave for work, this weathered, worn-down man who had once been Henrique Ferreira, who had once owned me, who had destroyed everything I loved. He looked nothing like a monster. He looked like a man who had been defeated by life, who carried the weight of failures and regrets visible in every stooped line of his body. I got out of the car. "David Carter," he turned. Our eyes met, and just like before, I saw it, recognition, fear, and that inexplicable guilt. "Mrs. Johnson," he stammered, I'm so sorry about what happened at your house. I don't know what came over me. I can't explain. I can't explain, I said. And I did. Standing on a cracked sidewalk in a neighborhood that was nothing like my manicured Coral Gables estate, I told David Carter about Azelie, about Henrique, about the plantation and the fire and the Quilombo and the 3 years of suffering that ended in death on a dirt floor. I told him everything. David listened in silence, his face growing paler with each word. When I finished, he was leaning against the wall of his building as if his legs couldn't support him. "I know," he whispered. I blinked. "What?" "I know. I've always known. Not the details, but I've had dreams my whole life. Nightmares. A White House burning. A woman's face, beautiful and full of hate. I wake up screaming, feeling like I've done something unforgivable, something that can never be made right." His eyes filled with tears. "I've spent my whole life feeling guilty for something I couldn't remember. Every relationship I've had has failed. Because I can't be happy. I don't deserve to be happy. I've known that in my bones since I was a child, but I never knew why. He looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw something I had not expected. I saw Henrique's guilt. The guilt of a man who had woken up from the madness of grief and cruelty and realized, too late, what he had become. The guilt of a man who had carried the weight of his sins across lifetimes, paying for them in loneliness and failure, and the inescapable feeling that he was broken beyond repair. "I'm sorry," David said, his voice breaking. "I know that doesn't mean anything. I know I can never undo what I did to you. But I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." And something in me broke. Not broke in a bad way. Broke open. The hatred I had carried, the hatred that Azelie had carried for nearly 200 years, began to crack, letting in light. I didn't forgive him. Not in that moment. Forgiveness was not something that could happen in an instant after lifetimes of pain. But I understood something I hadn't understood before. David Carter was as much a prisoner as I was. We were chained together across time and space by the weight of what had happened between us. And the only way to break those chains was to let them go. "I don't forgive you," I said. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I release you from my hatred. I release myself from my hatred. Whatever debt exists between us, I'm done collecting it." I turned and walked back to my car. Behind me, I heard David Carter crying. The months that followed were a journey of healing. I continued my sessions with Dr. Vasquez, processing the memories of Azelie's life and integrating them with my own identity. I was not Azelie. I was Amara, a modern woman with a family and a career and a full life. But Azelie was part of me, a layer of experience that had shaped my soul. And slowly, the burning in my wrists began to fade. Not all at once. Some days were harder than others. But the phantom chains that had haunted me since childhood were loosening their grip, releasing me from a prison I hadn't known I was in. I told Derek everything. To his credit, my husband listened without judgment. He didn't fully understand. How could anyone fully understand? But he believed me. He had known for 20 years that his wife was special, that I carried something deep and mysterious that made me who I was. Now he had a name for it. "So what happens now?" he asked, holding my hand across the kitchen table. "Now we live," I said. "We love our children. We build our life. We stop being haunted by the past." And that's what we did. But there was one more thing. 6 months after the confrontation, I received a letter. No return address, but I knew who it was from. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a handwritten note. "I've sold my business and I'm moving away, starting over somewhere no one knows me. I don't expect forgiveness, and I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that meeting you changed me. For the first time in my life, I understand why I've been so lost. I understand the weight I've been carrying. I don't know if I can ever make it right, but I'm going to try to be a better person in whatever time I have left. Not to earn your forgiveness, just because it's the right thing to do. Thank you for releasing me. I hope you find peace. David." I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. I did not respond. Some chains need to be broken completely. Years passed. My company grew into a global empire. My children graduated and started families of their own. My marriage remained strong, deepened by the secrets I had finally shared. And the burning in my wrists never returned. But sometimes, in quiet moments, I think about Azelie, about a young woman who was broken by cruelty but never truly defeated, about a spirit fierce enough to burn down a plantation and escape into the mountains, about a love cut short and a death that should have been the end but wasn't. Azelie had promised that she and Henrique would meet again, that he would feel everything she had felt, that the universe would not forget, and the universe kept that promise. Not through revenge, as Azelie might have imagined in her suffering, not through cruelty repaid with cruelty, but through something far more profound, the opportunity for both souls to finally be free. David Carter, in his lonely apartment, had felt the weight of Henrique's sins pressing down on him every day of his life. He had lived in a prison of guilt and failure, never understanding why, never able to escape. And I, inheriting Azelie's hatred, along with her memories, had carried chains around my wrists for 40 years. Invisible chains, but chains nonetheless. The confrontation freed us both. Not because David had been punished enough, not because I had gotten revenge, but because we had faced each other, acknowledged the truth, and chosen to break the cycle. In releasing David from my hatred, I released myself. And somewhere, beyond time and space, Azelie is finally at peace. Some people believe that past lives are just stories we tell ourselves, metaphors for psychological patterns that we don't fully understand. Others believe that the soul is eternal, that it carries experiences from lifetime to lifetime, seeking growth, seeking resolution, seeking peace. What do I believe? I believe that the past is never truly past, that the things we do echo forward through time, affecting lives we will never know, shaping futures we cannot imagine. And I believe that we have a choice. We can carry our chains forever, passing them from lifetime to lifetime, allowing hatred and grief and guilt to define us. Or we can do the hard work of letting go. I made my choice on a cracked sidewalk in Miami. I chose to break the cycle. I chose to be free. And maybe, just maybe, that choice rippled backward through time as well as forward. Maybe, in some way we can't understand, Azelie felt that release, not at the moment of her death, but at the moment when I finally let go of the chains. Maybe time is not a line but a circle, and healing in one life heals all the lives that came before. We can't know for certain, but we can choose. We can always choose. If this story moved you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, the chains we carry are often invisible, but they are not unbreakable. Sometimes all it takes is the courage to let go. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss a story. Every week, we explore the mysteries of past lives and the lessons they hold for us today. Thank you for watching. Until next time, may your soul find the peace it's searching for.